The massive warship floated silently through the darkness of space. Inside its steel corridors, hundreds of different alien species moved about their duties. They all served under one ruler, Alpha Chronax of the Vorthian Empire. Chronax stood 3 meters tall, his scaled skin gleaming purple under the harsh lights. Four muscular arms hung at his sides, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. His yellow eyes watched everything from his command throne. For 200 years, no one had dared challenge his authority. "Bring the new acquisition," Chronax commanded. His voice rumbled like thunder through the bridge. 2 guards dragged a figure forward. It was smaller than most creatures on the ship, standing barely 2 meters tall. The being had smooth skin, no scales or fur, and only 2 arms. Its clothing was torn from capture, but it stood straight despite the chains. "What is this pathetic creature?" Chronax asked, leaning forward. "A human, Alpha," his science officer replied. "We captured it from a small vessel near the outer rim. Their species is new to the Galactic Registry." Chronax studied the human with interest. The creature's brown eyes met his gaze without flinching. Strange. Most beings looked away from an Alpha's stare. "Human," Chronax said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You now belong to the Vorthian Empire. You will obey every command without question. Kneel before your Alpha." The human tilted its head slightly. A small smile appeared on its face. Then, it spoke a single word that would echo through the ship's history. "No." Silence fell across the bridge. Even the constant hum of the engines seemed to pause. Every crew member frozen in shock. No one said no to an Alpha. It simply wasn't done. Chronax's yellow eyes narrowed. Perhaps the translator had malfunctioned. "You will kneel," he repeated slowly. "This is not a request. It is a command from your Alpha." The human's smile grew wider. "Make me." Gasps erupted from the crew. Several beings stepped back, expecting immediate violence. Chronax's claws extended fully, gleaming under the lights. His muscles tensed beneath his scales. "Do you not understand your position, human?" Chronax rose from his throne, his full height casting a shadow over the smaller being. "I have conquered 17 systems. I command a fleet of thousands. Species across the galaxy tremble at my name. You are nothing but a single, weak creature in chains." The human shrugged. "That's nice. Still not kneeling though." The defiance was incomprehensible. Chronax had seen brave warriors break down in tears at his presence. Proud species had surrendered entire planets rather than face his wrath. Yet this small, soft creature stood there as if they were having a casual conversation. "Guards," Chronax growled. "Force this creature to its knees." 4 guards moved forward, each from a different warrior species. They grabbed the human's shoulders and tried to push down. The human resisted, planting its feet firmly. The guards pushed harder, their muscles straining. "Is that all you've got?" the human asked, still smiling. "My grandmother pushes harder when she's trying to get me to sit for dinner." The guards doubled their efforts. One of them, a massive Gorbok with stone-like skin, put his full weight behind the push. The human's knees bent slightly, then straightened again. "Getting warmer," the human commented. "But still not quite there." Chronax watched in growing bewilderment. The human wasn't especially strong. The guards were clearly capable of forcing it down. Yet somehow, through sheer stubbornness, it remained standing. "Enough," Chronax commanded. The guards stepped back, confused and embarrassed. "Human, explain yourself. Why do you refuse a direct order from an Alpha?" The human looked thoughtful for a moment. "Well, where I come from, we have this thing called free will. It means I get to choose what I do. And, right now, I choose to stand." "Free will?" Chronax tested the words. "You believe you have a choice when facing a superior being?" "Everyone always has a choice," the human replied. "You can threaten me, hurt me, even kill me. But, you can't make me kneel unless I decide to. That's my choice to make, not yours. The concept was alien to Kronax. In Vorthian society, alphas commanded and others obeyed. It was the natural order, unchanged for millennia. The strong ruled the weak. The powerful directed the powerless. This human spoke of something entirely different. You realize I could destroy you with a single strike? Kronax asked. Probably, the human agreed. So what? So what? Kronax repeated, incredulous. You would die. We all die eventually. But, we don't all get to choose how we live. I choose to live standing up. The bridge crew watched in fascination. Some whispered among themselves, careful not to draw the Alpha's attention. This was unprecedented. Not just the refusal, but the calm way the human explained it. Kronax found himself at a loss. In 2 centuries of rule, he had never encountered this situation. Every being he met either served willingly or was forced into submission. The human offered a third option, polite refusal. What is your name, human? Kronax asked, genuinely curious now. Sarah Chen, the human replied. Cargo pilot from Earth. I was just trying to deliver some medical supplies when your ships grabbed me. Sarah Chen, Kronax repeated. You interest me. Your species is either very brave or very foolish. Probably both, Sarah admitted. We're kind of known for that. Kronax returned to his throne, his mind working through this puzzle. The human, Sarah, remained standing in the center of the bridge. The chains on her wrists seemed almost decorative now, as if she wore them by choice rather than force. Take the human to a cell, Kronax ordered. Give it food and water. I will decide its fate later. As the guards led Sarah away, she turned back to look at the Alpha. Hey, just so you know, the cell thing isn't going to change my mind about the kneeling. We shall see, Kronax replied. After the human left, the bridge remained unusually quiet. Kronax's second-in-command, a sleek Altarian named Vex, approached carefully. Alpha, shall I prepare the neural adjustment chamber? We could modify its thinking patterns. No, Kronax said slowly. Not yet. I want to understand this free will it speaks of. But, Alpha, if word spreads that someone refused your command and lived, then, what, Vex? Will the Empire crumble because one small alien said no? Kronax's tone carried a warning. Or are you suggesting my rule is so weak that it cannot withstand a single question? Vex bowed quickly. Of course not, Alpha. Your wisdom guides us all. But, Kronax wasn't listening anymore. His thoughts remained on the human who had looked him in the eye and simply said make me. 2 small words that somehow felt larger than any challenge he had ever faced. In her cell, Sarah Chen sat on the metal bench and rubbed her wrists where the chains had been removed. The room was basic but clean. A tray of food sat nearby, some kind of protein paste and water. She ignored it for now. Through the small window, she could see the stars streaming by. Somewhere among them was Earth, probably wondering what happened to one small cargo ship. She wondered if she'd ever see home again. But, regret didn't enter her mind. When that big purple alien had demanded she kneel, something deep in human nature had risen up. The same thing that made her ancestors stand against tyranny throughout history. The simple, powerful belief that no one had the right to demand submission. Make me, she whispered to herself and smiled. It felt good to say. It felt human. The next morning, Kronax found himself standing outside the human cell. He had barely slept, his mind churning over their encounter. In 2 centuries of life, he had never lost sleep over a prisoner. Yet here he was. The guards opened the door. Inside, Sarah Chen sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed. She appeared to be doing some form of meditation. Even in captivity, she seemed completely at peace. Human, Kronax announced his presence. Sarah opened one eye. Oh, hey. Morning, I guess? Hard to tell in space. I have come to continue our discussion, Kronak said, entering the cell. His massive frame filled most of the small space. Cool. Want to sit? The floor's not too bad. Sarah patted the spot beside her. The casualness of the invitation startled Kronax. No one invited an alpha to sit on a cell floor. Yet he found himself curious enough to accept. His joints protested as he lowered himself down, not designed for such informal positions. This is how humans sit, he asked. Sometimes. We're pretty flexible about furniture. Or the lack of it. Sarah stretched her legs out. So, what did you want to discuss? Your concept of free will. I have been analyzing it. You claim that choice cannot be taken from you, yet you are imprisoned. Is this not a contradiction? Sarah thought for a moment. Being in jail doesn't mean I don't have choices. I can choose how to spend my time, what to think about, how to react to things. You've limited my options, sure, but you haven't removed my ability to choose between the options I have. But surely you would prefer freedom? Of course. But preferring something and needing it to maintain my sense of self are different things. You could lock me in this cell forever, and I'd still be me. Still making choices, even if they're small ones. Kronax found the logic strangely compelling. In his world, power was everything. The ability to force others to your will define strength. Yet this human suggested that true strength came from within. Tell me about your Earth, Kronax said. How does a species develop such ideas? Sarah smiled. Oh boy, that's a long story. We've got thousands of years of history, and a lot of it is pretty messy. Wars, conquests, empires rising and falling. But, through it all, there's been this thread of people saying no to authority they didn't choose. She began telling stories. Ancient humans who refused to bow to false gods. Revolutionaries who stood against kings. Ordinary people who faced down tanks with nothing but courage. Workers who demanded dignity. Students who challenged systems. Kronax listened, fascinated. Each story seemed impossible. Why would weak beings challenge the strong? How could they win against superior force? But many of these rebels died, Kronax pointed out. Their defiance accomplished nothing. Did it though? Sarah asked. Every person who stood up made it a little easier for the next person. Every no chipped away at the idea that power equals right. Eventually, those chips become cracks, and the whole system breaks down. You speak of overthrowing order itself. Not order. Just the idea that some people are born to rule and others to obey. We tried that for a long time. Didn't work out great. A guard appeared at the door. Alpha, the senior staff awaits your morning briefing. Kronax felt irritation at the interruption. Tell them to proceed without me. The guard's eyes widened in shock, but he bowed and left. Kronax had never missed a morning briefing. The routine of command had defined his life for decades. Yet here he sat on a cell floor, learning from a prisoner. That was interesting, Sarah observed. You just made a choice that surprised your guard. Broke your own pattern. How did that feel? Kronax considered. Strange. But not unpleasant. That's free will in action. You could have gone to your briefing because it's what you always do. Instead, you chose to stay here because you wanted to. No one made that choice for you. The Alpha found himself re-examining his entire life through this new lens. How many of his actions were truly chosen? How many were simply following the patterns laid down by generations of Alphas before him? Your species confuses me, Kronax admitted. You are physically weak, technologically inferior, and new to the galaxy. Yet you speak as if you possess some great wisdom. Maybe wisdom isn't about being the strongest or the smartest, Sarah suggested. Maybe it's about understanding what really matters. We learned that the hard way on Earth. Nearly destroyed ourselves a few times before we figured it out. And what matters? The right to be yourself. To make your own choices, your own mistakes. To stand up when everyone tells you to kneel, if standing is what feels right. Over the following days, Kronax found himself returning to the cell repeatedly. Their conversations ranged from philosophy to history to the nature of power itself. Sarah told him about human art, music, and literature, all expressions of individual choice and creativity. Word spread through the ship. The Alpha was spending hours with the defiant human. Some crew members worried. Others whispered about what it might mean. Vex, the second in command, grew increasingly nervous. Alpha, Vex said during one of Kronax's rare appearances on the bridge. The crew grows restless. They wonder why the human has not been punished for its defiance. And, what would you have me do, Vex? Beat submission into it? It is the traditional way. The traditional way. Kronax turned to face his second. Tell me, Vex, do you follow me because you choose to or because tradition demands it? Vex seemed taken aback. Because you are Alpha. The strongest. It is the way. But, what if you could choose? What if tomorrow you woke up and decided you no longer wished to follow me? What would you do? I don't understand the question, Alpha. Such thoughts are not possible. But, Kronax could see the uncertainty in Vex's eyes. The question, once asked, could not be unasked. The idea, once planted, would grow. That evening, Kronax brought something different to Sarah's cell, a portable gaming board from his personal collection. It was a strategic game played across the galaxy, involving complex movements and counter-movements. I thought we might try something new, he said, setting up the pieces. Sarah examined the board with interest. Never seen this one before. What are the rules? As Kronax explained, he realized the game itself was a metaphor for his entire worldview. Dominant pieces controlled weaker ones. Victory came from forcing the opponent into positions where they had no choice but to yield. They began to play. Sarah lost the first game badly, still learning the rules. The second game was closer. By the third, she was holding her own. You learn quickly, Kronax noted. Thanks. But, I think I'm playing it wrong by your standards. Sarah moved a piece in an unexpected direction. See, you're trying to control my pieces, force me into corners. But, what if I just don't go where you want me to? She began making moves that seemed random, sacrificing powerful pieces for no apparent gain. Yet somehow, her chaotic strategy began to work. Kronax found his careful plans disrupted by choices that made no traditional sense. This is not how the game is played, he protested. Says who? Sarah grinned. Just because everyone's always played it one way doesn't mean it's the only way. By the end, Sarah had lost in technical terms but had completely reimagined how the game could be played. Kronax stared at the board, seeing new possibilities in a game he had played for decades. You do this with everything, he said. Take established systems and ask why. Until the system itself becomes questionable. It's kind of a human specialty. We're really good at looking at things and going, but what if we tried it differently? Sometimes it's genius, sometimes it's disaster, but it's always interesting. As Kronax returned to his quarters that night, he found himself questioning everything. The hierarchy he had spent his life climbing. The power he had fought to obtain. The obedience he had always demanded. What if Sarah was right? What if true strength wasn't about forcing others to obey but about choosing your own path? What if the greatest power was the ability to say no, not from defiance but from genuine choice? The next morning, something unprecedented happened. Kronax called a general assembly of all senior staff. As they gathered, whispers filled the room. The human situation had everyone on edge. I have been thinking, Kronax began, his voice carrying across the chamber. About tradition. About power. About the nature of our society. The room fell silent. Alphas didn't think, they commanded. They certainly didn't admit to uncertainty in front of subordinates. The human has raised questions I cannot dismiss. About choice. About the right to refuse. About what truly makes a being strong. Vex stepped forward. Alpha, surely you're not suggesting we listen to a primitive species that hasn't even achieved faster than light travel? I'm suggesting, Cronax said slowly, that perhaps wisdom and technology are not the same thing. That perhaps a species that has spent centuries learning to live with choice rather than mere obedience might understand something we do not. Shock rippled through the assembly. Several officers exchanged alarmed glances. This was beyond unprecedented, it was revolutionary. What would you have us do, Alpha? Someone asked. Cronax paused. The question itself proved the problem. They waited for his command, unable to conceive of deciding for themselves. I would have you think, he said finally. Consider. Question. Choose. Not because I command it, but because you decide it might be worthwhile. The assembly dissolved in confusion. Officers left muttering among themselves, unsure how to process what they had heard. Vex lingered, his expression troubled. Alpha, forgive my directness, but has the human compromised you somehow? Used some unknown mental influence? No, Vex. If anything, the human has freed me. From assumptions I never knew I was making. From limitations I placed on myself. That afternoon, Cronax made his most shocking decision yet. He ordered Sarah's cell door opened. Not just unlocked, removed entirely. You're free to move about the ship, he told her. Go where you wish. Do as you choose. Sarah stood in the doorway, surprised. Just like that? No conditions? No guards? No conditions. Though I ask not command, ask that you continue our conversations. Sure, Sarah said, stepping into the corridor. But only because I choose to, not because you're asking. Cronax found himself doing something he hadn't done in decades. He smiled. Not the predatory grin of an alpha asserting dominance, but a genuine expression of amusement and appreciation. I would expect nothing less from you, Sarah Chen. The change started small. Sarah Chen walking freely through the corridors was strange enough, but what happened next shook the very foundations of the ship's society. A young maintenance worker, a Rillan named Tech, was ordered by his supervisor to clean the waste processing units, the worst job on the ship. Instead of immediately complying, Tech paused. Why me? He asked. I cleaned them last week. It's Vorm's turn. The supervisor's mandibles clicked in shock. Because I ordered it. You dare question? Tech seemed to struggle with himself, then straightened. Yes. I question. The human questions the alpha himself. Why can't I question you? Word of Tech's defiance spread like wildfire. Within hours, small acts of choice began appearing throughout the ship. A cook decided to try a new recipe without permission. A navigator suggested a different course. A guard asked to be reassigned because he was bored. Vex burst into Cronax's quarters in a panic. Alpha, the ship is descending into chaos. The human's influence spreads like a virus. We must act before complete anarchy erupts. But Cronax was watching the security feeds with fascination. Is it chaos, Vex? Or is it life? Look closer. The ship still functions. Duties are still performed. But now beings are choosing their roles rather than simply accepting them. This is madness. How can order exist without absolute obedience? Perhaps we should ask the human. She seems to come from a world that manages it. They found Sarah in the observation deck, teaching a group of curious crew members something called rock, paper, scissors. The sight of various alien species trying to form the hand shapes with their different appendages was both amusing and profound. It's a game of choice, Sarah was explaining. No move is superior to all others. Each choice has strength and weakness. The fun is in trying to guess what your opponent will choose. Human, Vex interrupted angrily. Do you see what you've done? You've infected our crew with your chaotic ideas. Sarah looked around at the diverse group of beings, all engaged and seemingly happy. I see people making choices and having fun. Is that really so terrible? It undermines everything our society is built upon. Maybe your society was built on the wrong foundation, Sarah suggested gently. Maybe beings follow better when they choose to rather than when they're forced to. One of the crew members, a crystalline shard, chimed in with harmonic tones. I have served on this ship for 40 cycles. This is the first time I have felt curious. Engaged. As if my thoughts matter. Your thoughts have always mattered, Kronax said, entering the conversation. We simply never asked for them before. Vex turned on his alpha in frustration. You encourage this dissolution of order? What next? Shall we vote on battle strategies? Take polls on navigation? Let the lowest maintenance worker question your commands? If their questions have merit, why not? Kronax replied. Sarah, your people have experience with this type of society. How do you maintain function without rigid hierarchy? Sarah considered the question. It's not always easy. Democracy is messy, slow, and sometimes frustrating. But it's also flexible, innovative, and resilient. When people choose their path, they're invested in making it work. They own their successes and learn from their failures. But conflict must be constant, Vex argued. When everyone believes their opinion matters, how do you resolve disagreements? We discuss. We debate. We vote. We compromise. Sometimes we just agree to disagree and find a way to work around it. It's not perfect, but neither is blind obedience. Over the following weeks, the ship transformed. Kronax established councils where crew members could voice concerns and suggestions. Different species began collaborating in ways that hierarchy had previously prevented. The mixing of perspectives led to innovative solutions to old problems. Not everyone adapted easily. Some, like Vex, clung to the old ways. They predicted disaster at every turn. Yet disaster didn't come. The ship ran differently but not worse. In many ways, it ran better. Sarah became an unofficial advisor, not through appointment but through choice. Beings sought her out for perspective on this new way of thinking. She helped establish systems for fair decision-making that considered different species' needs and capabilities. One day, a crisis tested the new order. A hostile fleet was detected on an intercept course. Raiders who had heard about the chaos aboard Kronax's ship and saw opportunity. Now we'll see the failure of your experiment, Vex declared as alarms blared. Battle requires instant obedience, not committee meetings. But Kronax surprised everyone. All hands, this is your alpha. We face a threat. I could command our response, but instead, I ask, who has ideas? How do we defend ourselves? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Navigators suggested evasion patterns. Engineers proposed power diversions. Weapons crews recommended targeting strategies. Even maintenance workers offered insights about vulnerable systems on raider ships. There's too much input. Vex protested. We need decisive action, not discussion. Then, let's synthesize, Sarah suggested. Take the best ideas from each group. The navigators know movement, the engineers know our capabilities, the weapons crews know combat. Combine their expertise. What emerged was a strategy no single mind would have conceived. It used the ship's diversity as strength, with each species' unique abilities contributing to the whole. The plan was complex, requiring coordination and trust rather than mere obedience. All stations, Kronax announced. You've heard the plan. Not my plan, our plan. Execute not because I command it, but because you choose to defend our home. Our way of life. Our right to choose. The battle was unlike any in Vorthian military history. Crew members adapted in real time, making decisions based on changing circumstances rather than waiting for orders. The flexibility confused the raiders, who expected traditional rigid responses. When the raider commander appeared on screen to demand surrender, he faced something unprecedented. Not just Kronax, but representatives from across the ship standing together. "You will submit to our authority," the raider commander snarled. The entire bridge crew responded in unison, a dozen species speaking as one, "Make us." The raiders, faced with unified defiance rather than fearful obedience, found themselves psychologically off balance. Their usual tactics of intimidation failed. The battle turned decisively when a junior tactical officer, who would never have dared speak in the old system, noticed a pattern in the raider formations and suggested an exploit. Victory came not through superior force but through superior coordination. The raiders retreated, confused and demoralized by an enemy that fought not from fear of their commanders but from personal investment in the outcome. In the aftermath, even Vex had to admit the effectiveness of what he witnessed. "I still don't understand it," he confessed to Kronax. "How can such chaos produce such unity?" "Because it's not chaos," Sarah explained, joining them. "It's organized choice. When beings fight for something they believe in rather than something they're ordered to protect, they fight harder and smarter." Kronax looked out at the stars, contemplating how much had changed. "I spent 2 centuries believing that power meant the ability to force obedience. But perhaps true power is the ability to inspire choice." "The question is," Sarah said, "what happens now?" This was just one ship. "You're part of a vast empire built on the old ways." Kronax turned to face her. "Then, perhaps it's time for the empire to face the same choice I did. To examine what it is and decide what it wants to become. That could mean civil war," Vex warned. "Other alphas won't accept this philosophy. They'll see it as weakness." "Then, they'll learn what we learned," Kronax said. "That beings who choose to stand together are stronger than those forced to kneel alone." The transformation of Kronax's ship became legend throughout the galaxy. Some called it the human incident, others the choice revolution. Ships arrived to challenge them, to restore proper order, but faced crews who fought with unprecedented coordination and determination. More importantly, the ideas spread. Other beings on other ships began to question. Small acts of choice appeared throughout the Empire. Alphas found themselves facing the same dilemma Kronax had: how to respond to Make Me. Some chose violence, crushing dissent. But violence only proved the dissenters' point that the system relied on force rather than legitimacy. Others, like Kronax, chose to listen, to adapt, to evolve. Sarah eventually repaired her cargo ship with enthusiastic help from engineers eager to learn about human technology. As she prepared to leave, a ceremony unlike any in Vorthian history took place. The entire crew assembled not because they were ordered, but because they chose to. Each being brought something: a small gift, a memory, a token of appreciation for the human who had changed their lives by refusing to kneel. "I should probably get going," Sarah said, clearly moved by the gesture. "Earth is wondering what happened to those medical supplies." "Will you return?" Kronax asked. "Maybe. If I choose to," Sarah said with a smile. "But I think you've got things handled here. The hardest part about freedom is that there's no instruction manual. You have to figure it out as you go." "Then, we will make mistakes," Kronax acknowledged. "Definitely. But they'll be your mistakes to learn from. That's what makes them valuable." As Sarah's ship departed, Kronax stood on the bridge, not on a throne but among his crew. Vex stood beside him, still adjusting but no longer resisting. "Do you regret meeting her?" Vex asked. Kronax considered the question. His life had been simpler before, his purpose clearer. Command had been easier when unquestioned. But simplicity and ease weren't everything. "No," he said finally. "She showed us we were not truly strong, merely unopposed. Now we have the chance to develop real strength, the kind that comes from being standing together by choice." On her journey home, Sarah sent one final message to the ship: "Remember, the most powerful word in any language isn't yes or no, it's why. Keep asking it. The Vorthian Empire would never be the same." The revolution started by a single human refusing to kneel would reshape galactic civilization. Not through conquest or violence, but through the simple, radical idea that every being had the right to choose. Some called it chaos. Others called it freedom. But, for those who lived through the transformation, who discovered they could stand when they had only known how to kneel, it was simply life as it was meant to be lived. And it all started with 2 words: make me. In the years that followed, the story spread across the galaxy, told in countless languages and forms. How a human cargo pilot faced down an alpha and won not through strength or cunning, but through the simple insistence on choice. Children of 100 species grew up learning that obedience without understanding was not strength but weakness. That questioning authority was not defiance but wisdom. That standing for your beliefs, even when standing alone, was the highest form of courage. The galaxy became a more complex place but also a more vibrant one. The rigid hierarchies that had defined civilizations for millennia gave way to more flexible systems. Not perfect systems, beings still struggled with balancing freedom and order, choice and responsibility. But they were systems that recognized a fundamental truth Sarah Chen had demonstrated: true authority comes not from the ability to force obedience, but from earning the choice to be followed. And, in a small apartment on Earth, Sarah Chen returned to her life, delivering cargo and living quietly. She never sought fame for her role in transforming an empire. When asked about it, she would just shrug and say, "I just didn't feel like kneeling that day." But, sometimes, on clear nights, she would look up at the stars and wonder about Kronax and his crew. About the choices they were making, the mistakes they were learning from, the society they were building. And she would smile, knowing that somewhere among those distant lights, beings were standing tall because they chose to.